We're going to be reacting to this software engineering net worth video. The reason why I want to react to this is just because I hear a lot of videos out there. I see a lot of videos about there basically discouraging everyone, saying the AI is going to take your job. Actually, recently there was a Amazon layoff. I think they've laid off like 15,000 people or something like that. So I just want to kind of give motivation to engineers out there, or anyone looking to get into computer science or tech in general. Honestly, anyone who thinks AI is going to replace tech is they're out of their mind. That's my personal opinion. There's just no way, unless like something fundamentally changes. With that being said, in this video, we're going to be talking about for engineer net worths are wild, real data. This is by Connor Ardman. So shout out to this guy. He made this video like a year ago. I was actually looking to react to this for a while. So, but yeah, without further ado, let's go ahead and get into this. Let's get into this video.
I want to talk about money a bit because I see a lot of misconceptions about this and overall just some bad information. So how rich essentially can software engineers actually become?
In my face.
What is sort of the ceiling, and what do most software engineers actually end up making throughout their careers? And I think some of the data on this, no matter what your preconceived notions are, might actually surprise you a bit. So first, one of the biggest factors in how much a software engineer can actually make is simply just the location that they are actually based. So salaries in the United States are typically much higher than those pretty much anywhere else in the world, even places that are more expensive to live. And within the United States, there's still a lot of variance. So the highest paying software engineering jobs happen to be in cities that tend to be some of the most expensive cities. Specifically, San Francisco, New York City, and Seattle tend to be where most of the high-paying tech jobs are. Of course, there are exceptions. There are plenty of high-paying tech jobs elsewhere in the country, but the majority of them tend to be in those three cities or the sort of metro areas surrounding those cities. And generally speaking, you'll see people divide these into three categories. So high cost of living cities, like the ones I just mentioned.
Yeah, so the first point he brings up is basically the location where your salary is matters a lot. And what I would say is that anyone looking to get a tech job, honestly, just do like the basically cost analysis. Just look at like how much your cost of living is going to be, and then just subtract that, or take your salary and then subtract your cost of living. So, like any individual who wants to grow a, net worth or whatever, you always want to just have a good, it doesn't really matter how much you make. It really matters how much you save, right? So that's really that matters. If you get paid like $500,000 in the Bay Area, but then you have to pay like $8,000 a month in rent. So is that really worth it? I don't know. So that's just something to keep in mind. But yeah, location does matter a lot. And if you get paid a lot in a different location, but at the same time, the cost of living is really high, that doesn't really matter. Really matters is how much you actually are able to save. So yeah.
Medium cost of living cities, which will be cities sort of like Austin, Texas, where the salaries are still going to be high, but not as high as something like San Francisco. And then low cost of living cities, where typically the salaries are going to be lower, but the cost of living is also much lower. And again, there are tons of exceptions, but for the most part, this tends to be the case. All right, so I want to look at some actual data. So this is levels.fyi, which is a great tool just for tracking the general.
And keep in mind, guys, this was released a year ago. So if you guys want to see an updated version of this, I might actually make this. So let me know down in the comments below if you guys want to see something like that. I might. But yeah, so levels.fyi is a really helpful site. Basically, this is a open source site where you can see different salaries from all different types of companies around the world. So he'll probably mention that as well.
Trends in software engineering and how much people are actually being paid. I found in my own experience, it tends to actually be very accurate because they have good data that's actually coming from software engineers. So this is their leaderboard, so the highest paying companies in different areas. So we're looking at software engineers in the San Francisco Bay Area, where the vast majority of the big tech companies tend to be based, and we're looking at entry-level positions. So these are 0 to 2 years of experience. So this would be a job you'd get directly out of college, or maybe after like 1 year of experience. We can see the highest paying companies at this level are Roblox and Stripe, coming in at just shy of $250,000 per year. Now, a couple things to note here. This is not all cash compensation.
Now, this is crazy. $250,000, man. It's like, people don't realize the reason why this is so special is because you might argue that, doctors make more, and doctors do make a lot more. But what's so crazy about this is usually people are, coming out of college at like 21, 22, 23. And that's $250,000 at 23 that's crazy, man.
This is not just your salary. So we can see the breakdown here. The base salary is actually $150,000, with $88,000 of it being stock and then $9,000 of it being a bonus. So you can debate exactly how much that $88,000 in stock is actually worth. Is it worth the entire $88,000, or do you view that as less because it's a little bit harder to actually get rid of, especially if you're working at a company that's not publicly traded. Additionally, note that these are the top tier companies. These are the companies that pay the most. So there are going to be a ton of companies that pay a lot less than this. This is just sort of the max that you could expect as an entry-level developer in San Francisco. And if we do look at some of the other cities that are high cost of living, for example, Seattle, you'll see we have fairly similar data. So if we go to entry level, we'll see LinkedIn in Seattle is the highest paying according to this, fairly similar.
So do you guys see this right? He skipped over that, but this is kind of like the senior level, L5. I'd argue, yeah, L5 is kind of the senior level. L4 is mid-level. So, if you're a senior level engineer at Databricks, you're going to make $600,000 a year. If you're at senior level at Airbnb, you're going to make 500,000, Netflix 500,000. Like, dang. Like, I'm not gonna lie, if you're a senior, you really have to work for what, 2 years, 3 years, and you're pretty much retired. So that's pretty crazy. And like I said, guys, you can get into these positions at a pretty young age. So imagine if you're a senior at, let's say, the age of let's say 30 years old, right? Let's be realistic. If you're a senior at 30 years old, you work there for 10 years, right? You're making $5 million and you're barely turning 40.
Our data. So if we go to entry level, we'll see LinkedIn in Seattle is the highest paying according to this at about $222,000. So about a $30,000 difference. But when you account for the difference in taxes, which we'll look at in a minute, it's actually about the exact same. And interestingly, if we go to New York City, it's going to be a little bit different. So if we go to entry level here, you'll see there's a couple that are way higher up here at the top. So we have Jane Street and Hudson River Trading specifically. So these are going to be hedge funds that, for one, are just very small companies. So they don't actually employ that many people, but also they just tend to pay extremely well. Now, that said, anecdotally from people I've talked to who have worked at different hedge funds in New York City, you do sort of work for that extra compensation. So it's not very uncommon for people to be working like 60-hour weeks at these jobs compared to a typical 40-hour work week, which sort of accounts for making so much more money. Now, of course, all of this data is before taxes. So how much of this money do you actually get to keep? Well, this is on Smart Asset. This is an income tax calculator. So if you make $250,000 in San Francisco, which would be sort of the top of that range for a new graduate, you would actually end up keeping about $160,000 of it. So the rest of it would end up going to taxes. So you're going to pay nearly $100,000 per year in taxes. And if we go to New York City, it's actually going to be very similar. So New York, you'll see we also keep just under $160,000. Now, interestingly, a bit of a sweet spot tends to be Seattle. So if we look at Seattle, there's actually no state income tax in Washington. So it means you can keep a lot more. So you get $180,000 if you're able to make that $250,000 salary. Of course, like we saw, these salaries in Seattle do tend to be just a little bit lower than they are in San Francisco. So if, say, you make about $220,000 instead of $250,000, well, now you're back to that $160,000 number. So once you account for taxes, you end up with basically the same result, assuming that you have about that $30,000 difference in how much money you're actually making. But like I said,
yeah, so that's kind of the point where I mentioned earlier. It really matters about your location, right? So if you're making, $500,000 a year, but you're spending, $400,000 in cost of living compared to somebody who's making $100,000 a year and they're making, they're not really spending anything in cost of living because it's complete for free. I mean, who's really making more, right? The person who's making the 500 is probably even working harder than the person who's making the 100. So like I said, really, only thing that ever matters is how much you can actually save. It doesn't matter how much you make, right? So yeah.
Taxes aren't the end of it. You also are just living in one of the most expensive cities in the country. So this is the current cost of living by city. And you can see in the United States, New York City is actually the most expensive city to live in. So even if you have that high hedge fund salary, you're going to be paying a lot in taxes and just all of your expenses will be very high. San Francisco is then number 2 and Seattle is not far behind at number 6. So all of these are very high cost of living areas, as are most of the highest paying tech jobs in the United States. And if we look at the cost of living in New York City specifically, it's very high, and to a lot of people that have never lived in New York or even in the United States, it can be pretty shocking. So of course this can vary a lot based on your own circumstances, but this says a single person is estimated to have monthly costs of $1,600 and a family of 4 of $6,100 in New York City, and that does not count rent. So if we come down all the way down here to the bottom, we're going to see the rent for an apartment. So a 1-bedroom apartment in the city center in New York City is about $4,000 per month. So that is just a lot of money to be spending on rent every single month. And personally, I know people who are spending a lot more than that and even who have roommates. So if you don't want to have a huge commute to get to work every day, you are likely going to be paying just an exorbitant amount of money for rent. And these are not super luxurious buildings that you're living in. And if we go to San Francisco, you'll see something similar. So let's look at San Francisco, California. You'll see here the average costs are about $1,573 per month, not counting rent, and $5,690 if you do have a family of 4. And then if we look at rent, it is saying that rent is going to be about $3,000 per month in San Francisco for a 1-bedroom. And again, personally, I do know people in this area who $1,000 per month in San Francisco for a 1-bedroom.
Yo, $3,000 a month for a 1-bedroom is absolutely insane. Yo, that is crazy. And you guys also have to think these aren't even like nice apartments either. These are pretty these are the average. This is so more than likely, I mean, you're going to be in a rundown apartment, 1-bedroom. I mean, $3,000.
And again, personally, I do know people in this area who spend a lot more than this on rent. And that's not them like balling out on some big penthouse apartment. It's just them living what most people would consider to be a pretty standard lifestyle. But okay, let's say you have one of these high-paying jobs making $250,000 in the San Francisco area. And then say your rent is $3,000 a month and your monthly expenses are $1,500 a month. That would put you at roughly $4,500 a month in expenses, or about $54,000 per year. Now, of course, this doesn't account for taking any vacations, or maybe you have a lot of debt to actually get that degree that you needed to get this high-paying job, right? A lot of people have a ton of student loan debt, or maybe you have some medical debt, or you're helping out family or something else, right? This is not accounting for any of this. This is just assuming that you are a single person with these sort of average expenses and nothing on top. And of course, if you were in New York City, you'd assume that the expenses would be a little bit higher, and in Seattle, they might be a little bit lower, but we'll just use these numbers for now. So remember, of our $250,000, we kept about $160,000 after taxes. And then we spent about $54,000 per year on expenses. Let's assume we have a few other miscellaneous things that might come up. That's going to mean we're going to save about $100,000 per year. And of course, this is going to be before things like 401k contributions or any debt that you might have to pay off. And also, this doesn't account for the fact that a lot of the compensation was in stock, and sometimes this is stock that you can't actually sell. So if you're saving $100,000, but say $60,000 of it was stock, you really aren't saving that much money comparative to your salary if you aren't able to ever sell that stock. But of course, you're not going to stay an entry-level developer forever, so let's look at what the other levels actually look like. So the first promotion will be to a software engineer 2. This is usually 2 to 5 years of experience, but sometimes it can be earlier. So this is what I was promoted.
Yeah, so I mean that kind of gives you guys a gist of like this video. I mean, he's gonna go through all the levels and stuff like that, and kind of mention what I mentioned earlier. So yeah, if you're a medium level, or what are they? Yeah, mid-level. They call it mid-level engineer. You're gonna be, if you're at a top company, at least you're gonna be making like 300,000. Like I said, if you move up a little bit more, senior level, staff level, the salaries are just gonna go up and up in there. So I mean, as you guys can see, tech is very lucrative. But one thing I'm gonna say to people that are trying to break into tech or in tech, this isn't the standard. Like these are the top companies, and usually these people at these companies are either super talented, or they got it at an early time, or maybe they just know somebody at the company or something like that, right? So yeah, now obviously not all software engineers make this much, but I would say it's more than likely you're going to make like 200, 250. I mean, that's like pretty much what I see, and I hear other people making that, so that's kind of accurate. But as far as like 600,000, 700,000, that's like pretty rare. You either have to be super talented or go to like a top school like Harvard or stuff like that. So yeah, I think that honestly wraps up the video for today. If you guys got this far into the video, I really appreciate it. If you guys want to see more videos like this, let me know down in the comments below. Also, get this video up to 3 likes, and I'll make another video similar to this. So with that being said, I appreciate you guys getting this far into the video. Also, go ahead and subscribe. We're on the road to 600 subscribers. And with that being said, appreciate you guys getting this far, and thank you for watching.